Well, what an exciting morning to first start out with Patrick and talking about where we're going. As you recall, we talked about in San Antonio our vision of the year 2005, and you can certainly see we're progressing well there in terms of how we're doing in the year 2000. And I think the highlight was hearing about the charitable projects that people have been doing. That was very touching to see all of the contributions that people have been making out there. We're going to be doing a first today, and that is it's going to be the first time that we really give a message on the history of the company. We've never done this before. And with so many people new to the company, I was amazed at how many people stood up yesterday when we talked about being new, being this the first training meeting. I thought it would be good. We thought it would be good to talk about the history, where the company had its foundation, its roots, who some of the key people were, some of the key events, some of the key clients along the way. So we're going to do that. Before we start, I want to put a disclaimer here, though. Overall, general disclaimer, so I don't do it along the way. The nice thing about being here at the beginning, or one of the few people here at the beginning, is you can switch history around and sequence slightly and make some adjustments along the way, and not too many people are going to be able to catch me at that. The otherwise type of disclaimers are, I hope we have some people who aren't going to be embarrassed too easily, because we made a few slight modifications on pictures of people in this computer, digital age. We were able to make some adjustments and fine-tuning to get the message across. Before I get started too far, I want to introduce my wife, Gail, if you haven't met her, because I'm going to be talking about Gail a lot when we talk about the origin of the company and the decisions that were made to get the company started. So, Gail, if you could stand for a second. This is my better half. Well, you can't really look at the history of the company. Karen, how do I get the computer screen here to, I'm not sure where Karen's at. How do I get the computer screen here to show what's on the screen up there? Okay. Hopefully it'll stay on. Okay. You can't really talk about the history of the company without keeping four very important geographic locations in mind. And those would be Salt Lake City, Portland, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the natural final of those three larger cities would be Oxnard, California. Those were the key cities in shaping Stockamp and Associates. Now, Salt Lake City is important because this is where I was born and grew up the first 9 years of my life. And I'm a big believer that traits and characteristics are developed early in life and carried on and used later in life. Now, Patrick and Scott, just so you know I'm not on needing disclaimers already, Patrick and Scott can validate at least that I said this was my house when I drove them by it a couple weeks ago when we were at the University of Utah. Well, I was fortunate enough, and this is me in front of the house when I was about 7 years old or so. I was fortunate enough to grow up across the street from this wonderful park called Liberty Park. It was an 80-acre park, had everything a child could desire. This is a picture of the lake, beautiful view of the Wasatch Mountains, for those of you who are familiar with it, across in the park. And this park was just great. This is the view we actually had from our house. You can't really see here, but you could see the Wasatch Mountains, and in the wintertime when the snow was on it, it was quite beautiful. Now, why is Liberty Park is important, and what does it have to do with Stockamp and Associates? Well, I learned several early traits in my life from Liberty Park. One was urgency, one was tenacity, another was competitiveness, and another was the importance of rising early in the day and getting started. Now, how do these all tie together? Well, the answer is pop bottles. We didn't come from a very wealthy family. My father was a pastor. I was the fourth boy in a family of 4 boys. And to earn extra money along the way, I would go across the street and collect pop bottles from the park. We could return them to the store, and they were worth 1 cent if you found a small one, and the big ones were worth 5 cents in those days. So there was big income to be had from that. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but it's a very, very competitive profession when you're collecting pop bottles. There's lots of kids out there, bigger kids, teenage kids, that are also trying to raise money. Worse yet, and I'm just sad to admit this, there's also older ladies collecting pop bottles, probably supplementing Social Security income. They weren't as quick as I was, though. So, in those days, Monday was a particularly big day. You had the weekend traffic, all the tennis courts had been filled, and you knew that Monday was going to be a bonanza. So my mom would wake me up early, and with great urgency, I'd get over there to the park to beat everyone else out. Tenacity entered in because you'd never know where you could find these pop bottles. Under garbage cans, in bushes, all around. So some of these early traits developed in Salt Lake City. I found a couple of other interests develop in Salt Lake City as well. Seems I had an affinity for airplanes and airports very early in life. I didn't know how much time later on I'd be spending on that. Seems I also had an affinity for building things. Here I'm building an airport out of computer punch cards. Now, for those of you who know my technical proficiency, I've never really left the age of computer punch cards. And so I developed the interest in airports, building things, and the like. Well, at age 9, we moved up to Portland. And I had a great childhood in Portland and entered into my high school years and picked up a couple of other traits that I didn't know I had along the way. One was leadership from being on the high school basketball team. And also, I missed the sophomore meeting. I hated group or class meetings, and I chose to skip one of my class meetings in my sophomore year. And as a joke, my sophomore classmates elected me junior class president. So all of a sudden, I had chances to develop leadership skills, but that also tied into my initial interest in raising money and raising and creating wealth. Because in my junior year, we set a record that stands to this day as us being the richest class, junior class, in the school history. Also, I developed some interest in unusual financial dealings at this point in time, and knowing when to strike at the opportunity. The senior class, who were juniors at the time when we had raised some of our money, was very much lacking money for their school gift. They couldn't give a school gift, which a senior class needs to do. We were there conveniently with a war chest of money, ready to loan them money at very usurious rates. We were accused of being very unique in terms of fundraising capabilities.
True, I was there.
Well, one other trait that I developed early on before I got into my professional consulting life, and that is it seems that I always had an interest and a knack for selling things, marketing a variety of things. Started out in high school with a very big interest in becoming the biggest Amway salesman you could ever imagine. I was going to have Amway distributions all over the place. But if cleaning products weren't your thing, I had other products for you. One was cutlery. If you've ever tried Cutco products, you know there's no finer cutlery around. And I went door to door selling cutlery. If cutlery wasn't what you wanted, I also had pots and pans. The finest stainless steel pots and pans you can imagine. Also, we had china to sell as well. But the real big value came when you bought the whole package, what we called then the Super 8 package. Well, I needed to supplement my income beyond just being a cutlery and china and pots and pans salesperson. I needed to supplement it in further ways because at the time I was funding an extensive education at Portland State University. And fireworks was the answer in this. We started out with a very modest beginning in fireworks, had one stand that we grew to annual sales, and this was good in the 80s, of $8,000 in about a 10-day time frame during the fireworks season. Being able to keep 25% of that was a pretty good income for a summer job to make from fireworks. But again, that wasn't good enough. We had the concepts of leverage, of resources, of people, of finances in mind, and we grew this fireworks operation to the point where at its peak we had 27 stands throughout Oregon. I had all my friends and relatives. We even had Gail's parents working one of the stands throughout Oregon, and we were the biggest fireworks dynasty around and making great income at that. Now, it was a hard choice, and I was really giving some thought at the time to maybe this is a pretty good life. Work a little bit in the summer, do fireworks, supplement it, do something like Christmas trees in December, and we'd have it made and then take it easy the rest of the year. Unfortunately, our plans were altered when we had a disruption, an uneventful disruption in our distribution network at Fireworks. So that got me serious. I heard the comment earlier about, boy, it's good to go to college and not do this manual labor. So completed my college years and then went to work in 1981 with Anderson Consulting, and that started a period of about 9.5 years, which I affectionately call the AC years. Now, I got into healthcare working right away at Anderson, and good things happened. And about 5 years in at Anderson, when it was 1986, had the good fortune of doing some work with this man. Now, this is where we're making a little bit of historical sequence. Doug looked a little bit younger in those days. But Doug was the CFO at Good Samaritan Hospital in Portland at this time. And I had done some work as a consultant when I was at Anderson with Doug. I had helped figure out why the short-stay surgery units were stacking up and showing up in gurneys and sitting in hallways for hours and how to streamline that and get them into rooms. We had done a medical records project. But Doug had a real need. Doug was about to make a change in his patient accounting director leadership. He wanted to take 6 months, do a national search, get the right person for the job, to get the right person from a national search process. So he called up John Curdell, who, if you don't know, was my boss at the time at Anderson. John and I go back almost 20 years now. And he said, can we borrow Dale for 6 months? John says, yes. And the next day, I was at Good Samaritan here with my assistant, Mary, trying to figure out what to do. I knew nothing about accounts receivable and healthcare and how they work together. So we were struggling with the decision of how to use our resources, how to best deploy the resources. So we went back to John and back to Doug, and in their collective wisdom, they said self-pay. Self-pay is where the money's at. We know we can turn this operation around with self-pay. So we took half of our available resources at the time, which is Scott Collins, put him in a place called Sherwood Forest. Why? I don't know if it had to do with the poor and the rich theme or not. And Scott went to work and built the best darn self-pay operation you could ever imagine. And we were so excited in these weekly updates with Doug and John when we'd see that this week we raised an extra $5,000 in cash from self-pay patients, and in our peak heyday, we were cranking $10,000 more a week from that improved self-pay operation. We learned a few things in those days. One of the traits we learned during this time frame was urgency. Here, Mary practices a technique we probably still do to this day. Last day of the month, goes to Blue Cross, picks up the payment, calls a runner, picks it up in their car, takes it to the lockbox and deposits it just in time for those final month-end numbers. We didn't have cellular technology or digital transfers in those days, so we did it the manual way. It was also during this time, you know how it is in life, you pick up quotes along the way. You hear things, and they become themes for you from some of the most unusual sources. And I'd have to say one of my biggest motivations and one of the things that defined how I approached work, particularly in this accounts receivable areas, came from an unlikely source, and that was a movie called The Coca-Cola Kid. Who's seen The Coca-Cola Kid before? A few people, not a lot. Very motivational. In The Coca-Cola Kid, this young guy comes down to Australia where the Coke sales are struggling, and he has to figure it out and turn it around. And what he says is, we have a month to get a job done, to find out, firstly, where the trouble is, secondly, why it is, thirdly, devise a strategy, and fourthly, act. Sounds simple? It is, you'll see. This really defined the work of a turnaround consultant and the way that we went about approaching our work when we did these accounts receivable projects. A few other things showed up in the early days at Good Samaritan, and that was graphics and measurements and metrics. This was the origin of Measure to Improve. Well, things moved along. Things went very well. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, from 1986 to 1990, we had a great success with Doug. Doug tried to hire me away to be the patient accounting director at Good Samaritan. Fortunately, I said no to his incredible offer, which would have doubled my pay at the time, Otherwise, I would have been one of those trouble patient accounting directors that you guys deal with all the time now. Things moved along. I supported work. We had a success there. We went over to Providence across town, had a success. I supported a number of projects along the way with Anderson up and down the West Coast and around the firm. But there was one thing that was missing, and maybe my last kind of character trait or attribute to fill in, and that is that, as you had seen from Fireworks, I had always had a strong entrepreneurial desire. Always felt like I wanted to have something and build something on my own. And this was further reinforced by just, again, sayings and things that I heard along the way. And one of those things was back in 1986, when Gail and I were traveling in the East in Florida. We were at Walt Disney World at Epcot in the American Pavilion, and came across this quote from Charles Lindbergh, which I carry to this day and keep in my wallet. And it says, "What kind of man would live where there is no daring? I don't believe in taking foolish chances, but nothing can be accomplished without taking any chances at all." And that really, I kept that thought with me through this time frame as I was evaluating what to do. And things really came to a head with Anderson in 1990. I call it the Seattle powwow. What was happening was Chicago and the main part of Anderson as a firm used to practice these receivable reduction projects in a very different way than we were doing out in the West. In fact, they did a project for Rush Presbyterian. And what they do is when they worked on a receivable project, they would come in with a busload of brand new hires, like many of the people in this room, and they would come in with 30 people, and they would actually put them on the phone as collectors, calling insurance companies, calling patients, and collecting money. And they'd have great short-term results. And that's the way they practiced it. Well, they had heard about what we were doing in Portland and were concerned, it's not following the same methodology. So they convened a powwow. They headed out to Seattle. And I still remember driving up there with Gail and saying, this is going to be the biggest waste of time, because they're going to say, we want to do it this way. This is the right way to do it. We're just going to ignore them and go about doing the work that we've done, where with very small project teams, we've gotten a bigger result. We've gotten permanency of benefit and very happy clients. I was shocked when we came into that meeting in Seattle and had, again, the corporate leaders in this whole practice area say, we're tired of the fact that we can't reference any of our clients after we've worked with them, and that we can't go back to them and see that the results are permanent. Teach us your way to do things. And that really forced the issue in my mind. I could either stay at Anderson and ride that accounts receivable practice and taking it across the company nationally to partnership, and that was certainly a great alternative. Largest consulting firm in the world, a pretty nice position to be in. Or I could jump over to the other side, jump off the cliff to the great unknown. And that really caused me to go through a series of steps of analysis the summer of 1990 as I was thinking about this. Here I am at my desk with my newborn daughter, Lindsay, way back then, and I did a lot of analysis. And for anybody who knows me, probably half of my analysis was contingency plans and what ifs and analysis like things like that. But it was a real period of planning. And along the way, I caught another hint. You know how you see these signals and signs along the way. We had a management retreat in the Seattle area with Anderson Consulting, and they had a theme going. They really wanted to get people motivated and look to the future. So they had a Star Trek theme going. And I had won an award. I think I was a manager who had sold the most amount of work as a manager or something like that in terms of annual sales. And so I won an award, and I came up and I got my reward, Star Trek theme, and it said, boldly go. So I thought, I don't think they intended it to be this. I still keep this. I still keep this on my desk. I brought it home to Gail and said, I think they're telling me something. So with well wishes from my employer and gratitude for the contributions that I had given them, we were off. Now, fortunately, the peers and friends that I had left behind didn't all feel the way this Anderson consulting partner. I had some of the best cards along the way. One from Dave and Carrie Smith said, best of luck, but somehow I don't think you will need any. That was from August 25th or 24th when we had my going away party, 1990. Another person writes, I am very happy for you. I'm sure you will do very well. I admire your entrepreneurship and overall style on leading the firm. Your friendship and mentoring have been valued and appreciated over the past years. I am sure we will continue to stay in close contact. Good luck, Paul Kohlheim. Little did he know, probably, that 9 years from then we'd get back together, and we do stay in close contact now. But the most valued memento that I have of starting out came from Jeff Jones, who on the night of the party when I was leaving gave me this incredibly nice gold pin that said Stockamp and Associates. It's the model of pins that we hand out now, and I carry that with me to this day and sign a lot of the important documents along the way with that. So we were off. The first week was quite a hectic week. It was a scary time. The liabilities were enormous. Gale calls to get us registered as a company, and they say, well, gee, why are you so excited about this? 95% of the companies fail within their first year. So she brought me that good news, and I said, Start to book flights and things like that and realize it's real money that you're starting to spend, some of your own money. But while the liabilities and risks were great, the assets were great too. Not necessarily financially. We had managed to save up about $17,000. And $17,000, I had figured a way that would carry us about 10 to 12 months, pay all the housing, pay all the food, pay all the clothes, all of that, living on a tight budget. But I had a war chest of frequent flyer tickets. I had 26 frequent flyer tickets, good for anywhere in the country. I just had to figure out how to fly between Tuesday morning and come back Wednesday afternoon and use those. And I had a pension plan of, I think, $20,000 if I needed to tie into that. So certainly on the asset side of things, financially wasn't where we had the wealth of resources. But I was young, I was energetic, I had a lot of drive, I had a faith that God would provide, and best yet, I had the most wonderful, supportive wife who was my cheerleader. All the way back to high school, she was my cheerleader. In fact, we just celebrated our 26th anniversary yesterday of our first date. And her card said on August 25th, "Sweetie, hope you're successful each step of the way. I know you will be. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so happy to be the other half of your team. Remember, seize the day. Faith, courage, and enthusiasm. We'll do it." And that meant a lot in terms of the support that was able to get. Well, what was our vision for the firm when we started out? Well, our vision was to have as John Curdell always likes to say, a West Coast-based accounts receivable firm. But it was going to be a small firm. At its peak capacity, we were only going to do 2 projects at any one point in time. And we were going to make adjustments in lifestyle that because we'd be traveling a lot during the week, we were going to structure it so that we'd have Fridays off, and then we'd also line the projects up so we had the summers off. So when we thought about the West Coast, we didn't have just the West Coast of the continental United States in mind. We were thinking some of this West Coast firm would be the West Coast of Maui, as you have a picture of here. That was our initial vision of what we were trying to build. Well, the first week came complete with a lot of decisions, several decisions in many different areas. One was a name. We needed to figure out what we wanted to be called. We had another key decision to make in terms of the software platform, what to build the company around. And there was an interesting decision, which I'll get into, that dealt with a toilet. So a name, software platform, and toilet were key decisions in the first week. We had considered other names like the Stockamp Group, Stockamp Consulting, Stockamp period. But I came up with Stockamp and Associates, even though Gail at the time couldn't figure it out, because to her knowledge, she, Lindsay, and our dog Chelsea, our golden retriever, were the only other associates that were around at the time. But that's the one we pushed forward with. Little did I know when I left Anderson, I walked away with nothing. I wanted to walk away and not even take a paper clip. So I dumped all of the information off of my computer and that. Little did I know how hard it would be to replicate my software platform. Do you know how hard it is to go out and find single-user multi-mate when you wanted to try to find that. That was tough to find. It wouldn't have changed my decision not to take that along, but we spent the whole first week looking for Multimate, and that was a tough thing to get. That was what built this. Now the toilet enters into the construction of our first office. It was a humble beginning. We had an unfinished furnace room that was about 90 square feet, that leaked, was damp, was musty and dusty and all of that. And that's what we were going to make into the first corporate headquarters. Well, this room had a toilet in the corner of it, taking up part of its 90 square feet. And so our first major decision as a company in terms of building this office is what to do with the toilet, because the stakes were huge. We didn't have a receptionist. We didn't have people that could take the calls. What if that first client prospect called back, when I was somewhere else in the house using the bathroom up there? Could have been enormous. It could have had changing implications in terms of how long it would have taken to get our first job. But the needs of the company, the fact that we saw growth and the need to use all of this 90 square feet eventually, ruled out, and the toilet went. So the construction began, and the first 4 days, from Saturday through Tuesday evening, working into the wee hours of the night, we converted this musty, dusty room into a pretty good office. My brother Carl, my oldest brother, came down from Seattle. Many of you know Carl and Joni. And he basically was the brains of the operation. He just told me what to do, and I followed. And we built this office. And we had a pretty nice office by the time things were said and done. This was our first corporate headquarters. Now, it didn't look quite so sophisticated on equipment in those days, because we didn't start to put copiers and things like that in until we made a little bit of money. But in its peak heyday of performance, we had 3 people working out of this office. Scott Collins was in the corner working on computer programming. Gail was at the near table working at accounting, and I was working at my desk. I still say probably to this day we generated the most revenue per square foot out of this office space. Well, Tuesday night ended. 4 hard days of building the office. The most important thing happened next was getting on a plane and making that first business trip. Didn't quite travel in the same luxury on that first business trip as I did when I was at Anderson. We spent time waiting for shuttle buses and shared rides and different kinds of hotels than I was accustomed to. But I went out to Minneapolis-St. Paul. Now, why did you say would we go out to Minneapolis-St. Paul, otherwise affectionately known as the frozen tundra? I mean, who else would celebrate ice parties in the winter and things like that? Well, Doug Fenstermaker had migrated from Portland to Health East in St. Paul, Minnesota a number of years ago. In fact, Doug called me when I was still at Anderson when he first showed up at Health East. They had a crisis. They had some real financial difficulties surrounding a difficult merger, and they were really hurting. So Doug called me, and it was the same day that Lindsay was born. He said, "Oh, yeah, that's nice. I'm glad you had your daughter. Can you come out here and help?" So 1 week later, Dave Smith and I are on a plane. Dave's at Anderson at the time, I'm at Anderson, and we lead the charge to have a very successful project over the next 6 months that to this day, Doug still gives credit with as having saved Health East and the associated 5,000 jobs along with that. So I went out to see Doug, and unbeknownst to me that what he had done since he had heard that I had left and I had called to set up this meeting is he had talked to his CEO, Tim Hansen, and said, Dale did a real good job for us, helped us at a critical time. He's going out on his own. I think we should help him. So I sat down at lunch with Doug, and he passed that message on to me, and we were able to structure during that lunch an agreement where I'd go out there and consult on 3 days a month for about $3,000 a month. Not enough to hire people, but I was excited. I picked up the phone right after lunch and called Gail and said, "You don't have to worry about going back to work," because we had young Lindsay at home, "and we can eat this year." So that was exciting, and I'll be forever grateful for Doug in the role that he played. But our big break came 2 or 3 weeks later, and that big break came, and this is where the fourth city of the geography enters in, from, of all places, Oxnard, California. Now, at Oxnard, California, there was a CFO named Arnie Simone. I had worked with Arnie Simone and had a very successful project. In fact, Dave Smith, Scott Collins were on that project when I was at Anderson, when Arnie Simone's was Daughters of Charity in the Bay Area. Now, Arnie was never too friendly at the time, and he didn't seem very, happy with us. It probably had to do with the fact that we were brought in by corporate over Arnie, who was at the individual hospital level, and he never really made the decision. But I called down to Daughters of Charity, found out that Arnie had left, and tracked him down to Oxnard. And I called Arnie, and we had a very short conversation. Didn't seem really warm. I wasn't sure about it. But he agreed to meet anyway. And I was going down there not to try to sell a project. I didn't know what he had going on at Oxnard. I was going down there to see whether he'd be a good reference for me. Whether he would say, yeah, he was at Anderson at the time, but he's the guy that delivered the goods. And whether there was people he could help introduce to. Well, I still remember being very sick the night before and being in a bad area of LA, not a bad area, but a bad area in terms of high cost, where I had to actually go in because I was not feeling so well and get the nearest hotel I could, which was like $120 a night, which was really scary. That was like 1% of the total value that had to carry us for the next year. But made it out the next day to Oxnard, went to Arnie's office. As soon as I stepped foot in the office, Arnie's pointing at this graph on his desk with accounts receivable days and a trend over time of it spiking. And he says, Dale, I got a job for you. What a big break that was. That was just like a month into the company. Who knows how long it would have taken if we hadn't had that break in terms of getting that connection with an organization. Sure, I had had chances to go consult with people who were working with Anderson at the time who wanted to then come and work with me after I had left, but that's not the way I wanted to start the company. So that was really a big break. So this is a picture of me with our first significant large contract, St. John's Oxnard, that quote that I keep with me right above the desk, it was a happy time. A few months later, our first big check from St. John's Oxnard, $33,000. Enormous, huge. That wouldn't carry us too long these days. I think it would be measured in a very short time frame. But actually, Health East beat Oxnard by a few days and was the first check in the company's history. It was a first retainer payment, which I think, along with expenses, was about $4,000. And that started out a triangle which would continue on for about 2 years, not necessarily between Oxnard, but between Southern California, Minneapolis, and Portland. Well, with the first contract came the need for the first associates. And Dave Smith became the first associate to throw his career down the toilet. We'll dwell on this a little bit while I get a drink of water. We had a custom in those days, since Anderson believed that people were throwing their careers down the toilet, to have everybody sign their contracts with the toilet seat wrapped around their head. Here's Dave Smith in this picture. Here's Dave and I mapping out strategy. We had a hit list. We were ready to roll at corporate headquarters. Now, you can't quite see it out in this picture, but you'll note a couple of things. A couple clients, actually, that we ended up getting. One was Abbott Northwestern. We had that on our target list from day one, and they became client number 3. If you look down at number 9, you'll see Northwestern as a client. How bold, how arrogant of this brand new startup firm to think they're going to walk into Chicago and pick off the number 1 provider in that market. But Dave and I were absolutely confident that with appropriate effort, we would indeed land Northwestern, which this Northwestern was located in a suburb north of Seattle. So we did get Northwestern, just not the one we were shooting for. We were glad about misaiming on that one. Well, after Dave was on board, we were faced with a real difficult challenge. We had a contract at St. John's that was heavily contingent. There's no way as a new startup firm that you were going to have a contract that paid most of your compensation on a non-contingent basis. So we were really in a chicken and egg situation. We didn't have the money to develop our software or hire someone in to develop our software, but without the software, we'd never be able to produce the money from our contingent fees to do that. So what to do? Well, back off in a plane back off to a meeting with Doug Fenstermaker. Doug and I had always enjoyed negotiating spars over the year and negotiating various things here and there. And in this situation, we were able to come to an agreement where Health East loaned us $50,000. Now, Doug didn't do too bad in return, so we got immediately $50,000, which let us go off and hire Scott Collins and bring him on board. Now, Doug didn't do too badly either. He got $7,000. His return on that was going to be $7,000 every time we installed the software that we developed. Plus, he was going to have rights to the software. And he was going to get up to $84,000 in return for his $50,000. Might take him a few years because, again, we were only going to do 1 or 2 projects a year. Now, Doug wanted his cake and eat it too because he wanted me to sign off personally on that $50,000 loan and not even have the risk of company success, but I didn't let him get away with that. But we would have never been able to get started on our software development without Doug. Now, Scott didn't know it, but Dave and I had some other plans for him as well, beyond just developing software. We had some other needs as a small growing company. There's actually a story here to tell. And that is, you know how you plan out your clean clothes for the week and you don't want to get surprised and have to be out of town an extra night. Well, Thursday night, right as I'm getting ready to leave back to Portland, we got a call from the organization that would become client number 2, Queen of Angels Hollywood Presbyterian. And they said, the board's ready to meet with you tomorrow. Can you come over? So we scrambled, cleaned clothes, washed clothes, and Scott, in his ever-serving attitude, do whatever it takes, actually ironed my shirt that night to go into that meeting the next morning. We did everything as a team. 2 associates wasn't enough. We needed more. So we went out looking for more, came across Tracy Schatz. This is the Tracy that's with Patrick today. Or she's not here today, but with Patrick. Tracy had just left Anderson Consulting at the time, was a little bit dismayed with the consulting world, wasn't sure what she wanted to do. So she wanted to be cautious, and she wanted to enter into an agreement that wasn't very long, like a 1-month time frame. Having no money, that suited us fine too. That 1 month sounded good to us as well. So we structured a 1-month agreement, and it worked very well. At the end of the month, we said, let's do it another month. And we did another month. Then we got bold and went to 2 months, and then 3 months. Tracy, to this day, still holds the record for the largest number of employment contracts anybody's ever had. Well, at this point in time, we sold our second project, Queen of Angels Hollywood Presbyterian, and we were in a critical need for resources. And we knew that finally we'd have to go in and tap the college ranks, but we didn't know where to go. We didn't have a presence on the campus. So we're sitting around at dinner one night, the whole company, sitting around one table. And we're talking about this, and Gail says, she gets credit for the first college recruit. Hey, I used to work with this woman at the phone company, Kathy Sharpen. And she had this wonderful young boy who used to come in, and he was the nicest guy, the most polite guy. I'm going to dwell on this guy because I know you like it. He was the nicest guy, and he's just great. He went to Stanford, and he's at this other college, and I'll bet he'd be interested. We should contact them. So we went through the process, and we were looking for a certain type of person. They had to portray the image. We knew that the people that had consulted before knew how to do that, but we didn't know how the others would dress, whether they would fit our image in that, so we weren't sure. But we knew we had a winner when Scott showed up for his first employment interview. He was dressed fit to kill, and we knew we had a winner. Our first direct hire into the company from college, and our first person who has gone through the ranks from being hired in all the way to recently being promoted to director, Scott Sharpen. But we needed more. And the next hire, I have to say, I felt a little bit of risk on. The reason is we tended to be conservative in terms of background and as a company. And I got a report back from Dave and Scott, who had lunch with Patrick Jennings, that the guy wore an earring. And that really got me to thinking, and I didn't know what to think. Would he fit our image? I just couldn't imagine what to think this guy might look like. I'm thinking, I don't know if this is going to fit or not. How did he ever survive in Toledo, where we had saved him from? for those who don't know, Patrick is got a real analytical mind. He likes to look at all of the facts in that, which really surprised me given what didn't seem to be conservative leanings here. But he put me through the most grilling interview that I ever had along the way. I don't know if he remembers it, but he had like a 12 or 14 page, it grows, I know, with time, and you expand that list of questionnaires. Let's look at an example of one question. Patrick definitely used his Stanford MBA to his greatest experience. Let's look at an example of just one question of the, I think, 8-hour questionnaire session we went through before he made his decision. Question 27. Again, we're a year old. We just have gotten our second project. We don't know where we're going. Where do you see the company being 5 years from now? What will your market penetration to the nearest percentage point be? Followed up by 27A, what revenue levels will this market penetration drive? That's not detailed enough, though. 8.1 continues on. What portion of revenue will come from services as they exist today versus new services and derivative products? Getting a little more detailed, please break down these revenue projections by market sector. That is, things like academic versus community-based. And also, it's important to know geography. Still not wanting to leave anything to chance and understanding the sensitivity of this analysis, he followed up with, please provide your underlying assumptions along with a sensitivity analysis of the impacts of variations of the key assumptions within a range of 2 standard deviations. I'll always remember that interview, Patrick. A little bit of historical embellishment here. So we grew. The first year was a great year. This is the company at our 1-year anniversary in our corporate headquarters, all jammed in there, all 6 people strong, ready to move on and push forward. It was a wonderful, wonderful group of people. Some of the reflections I have back on the first year, people asked some of the questions, and by the way, I do appreciate the questions that people provided along the way. One of the questions that people said is, did you ever give it a second thought? Did you think you had maybe made the wrong decision? And I have to tell you that because we hit the road running, got that first project about a month out, really never did. Never had time to give it a second thought. Never worked harder in my life. Never anticipated you could work that hard, and I know that was the case for Dave and all of the other, Scott and all of the other people that had been with us the first year as well. It was an interesting year. One of the things I learned the most that was critical to our ongoing success is the importance of tenacity. Take, for example, how we got that second client along the way, Queen of Angels Hollywood Press. Doug knew an investment banker on the West Coast named Gordon Howie. So I talked to Gordon Howie. Gordon Howie had a partner named John Woodward. So I talked to John Woodward, who knew someone at an office called Cal Mortgage, which is in California and backs up the debt of hospitals, by the name of Dick McManus. So I went and then met with Dick McManus, who knew the chairman of the board at Queen of Angels Hollywood Press, which actually led to that engagement. This was really the origins of the extensive reference marketing network that we have today, and how it works and how you follow it along, and you just are tenacious to go through each and every step along the way. One of the things that actually surprised me in this first year, and it shocks me to this day, did you know that negotiations on fees and things like that was actually easier in the early days than it is today? Now, who would think that with the complexity of the company, with all of the factors going on in healthcare today, you would think that starting out as a company in those days, it would be really, really difficult to do negotiations in those days. But there was a certain clarity of position that was, I wouldn't say refreshing, but it made life pretty simple. And I'm going to give you an example of a few of our negotiations now, also demonstrating our multimedia approach to this. Here we go. This is our first negotiation. This was with St. John's Oxnard in California, Arnie Simone on the other end. Well, Arnie, as I said, we think that there's a benefit of at least $12 to $15 million that we're going to provide your organization. That's an incredible return. We're ready to go. We're ready to do the project. I just can't understand why you are so fixed on your price. I think $450,000 is a very reasonable price for what we're going to invest in this. You know from the work that you've done with the big 6 consulting firms and things like that, that you can't get a return anywhere near that. You know that I've delivered the goods for you before. So I've really thought about it. I've sharpened my pencil. I've looked at it, and $450,000 really is the lowest that we can go.
Dale, I like you. I like what your organization does, but let's face it. I know you just left Anderson Consulting and you don't have any clients. It appears that you need me more than I need you. Tell you what, our deal's going to be $350,000. That's the end of the negotiation. Capiche?
Thanks, Arnie. It has been a good negotiation. I'd really call it a win-win. There was a certain sense of clarity. There was a certain sense of ease to those negotiations. Still undaunted by that negotiation failure. The next time, Queen of Angels, we went at it again, and we tried to get our price, which was $450,000. Called Joe Brandlin, the chairman of the board, and it went something like this. Yeah, Joe, as you know, we can provide you with $10 million of benefit, and you've seen it. Your people went out to St. John's and saw that what we can do. It's incredible, the return. You've got opportunity all over the place. You've got real risk in terms of your bond rating. And we've got the resources. We can be there next Monday and get started on it. But, in looking at this thing, you've wanted us to sharpen the pencil on price and look at that real closely. I'm looking at what we've got invested, the expertise. I'm also looking at the many other opportunities, that we've got out there right now. And 450's it. That's what we have to go with, and then that's kind of the final deal.
Listen, Dale, I'm not going to get my handkerchief out and cry for you. You're going to make plenty of money. My deal stands at $350,000.
Well, I'm just going to have to think about that, and I'll get back to you. Went over to the board that we had in our office, scanned the opportunities, and saw who would be immediately available on next Monday to start. Thought about it long and hard, and quickly raced to the phone to call back. This is Dale Stockamp from Stockamp and Associates. I was just talking to Joe. I hope he's still around, and I hope he's available. Is he there to talk to me?
Mr. Stockamp? Mr. Stockamp. Oh, yes, here it is. I have a note from Mr. Brandlin. He informed me that if you were to call, I was supposed to ask, do you want the deal at $350,000 or not?
If he's still at $350,000, I'll take it right now. That was negotiation number 2. Since we had so many problems with seeming to be able to get our price at $450,000, we thought, forget this $450,000 stuff. Let's go for the gold. And on our next client, we were trying to get $1 million from Abbott Northwestern, jumped from $350,000 to $1 million. And I had a number of very successful conversations with Dick Ozustowicz, the CFO, where we had floated by that number and said, $1 million is the number, and that's what we need to have. So $1 million is what we were going for. And I had subsequent conversations that kind of went like this. So, Dick, I understand that you've gotten approval for the SPE project, but I really haven't heard back from you on your reaction to the fees. We've talked about $1 million, and I assume that we're fine with that. I assume that the SPE project's been approved with your CEO and the board?
Dale, big things, real big things, big things. I really have to have you at my home dinner. The governor's going to be out there, maybe it's the mayor. Anyway, big things. Some real important things going on right now. Maybe you'd be interested.
Dick, I'd really enjoy having dinner sometime, but what about our contract?
Dale, don't worry about the contract. I'll take care of it.
Dick, just a little point of clarification. When you say taken care of, what do you mean?
Dale, are we done yet? I really got it.
Sometime later, I received a call from Dick after not settling in and knowing exactly where our contract stood. We had been providing services all along, and received this call from Dick early one morning.
Dale, big things, real big things going on, big things. By the way, I have to cancel our dinner. I'm leaving Abbott Northwestern.
I'm sorry, Dick, you said leaving Abbott. What does this mean to our project? What's it mean to our contract?
Oh, yeah, well, don't worry about your contract. It's all taken care of. I'll see you later. I'll call you when I land on my feet.
And so ended that negotiation, which was really a non-negotiation, and I later found out that Dick had not even talked to anybody within the organization about our contract, about our price, and gotten it signed. So we thought we'd made the big times. We had cleared the hurdle of $1 million, only to find out that nothing had happened with that. Fortunately, we had a very credible organization and one that backed up their word, and we were able to enter that. But interesting clarity of negotiations, very simple in those days, because in those days the client told you your price that you were going to have. We had controversy in those first days, in the early days as well. This is one slide ahead. We had controversy in the early days as well. At the end of the first year, you can see that we had Abbott Northwestern, St. John's, and Queen of Angels. But there was controversy. Now, I know that today we are sitting in and are in the city of Dia. For those of you who know, our famous Dia from UC San Diego. And you think, how bad can it be? And everybody deals with their difficult people. We had all sorts of controversy in those early days. Did you know that in the first year, Scott Collins was thrown out of the CFO's office twice within 1 hour for smirking at him? That I was spit at by the same CFO, that I was called by a vendor that says, don't be surprised because of the impact that you're having on vendors down here if you receive death threats. Death threats for doing accounts receivable work. And we also had an interesting situation where I had to call the president of the hospital, Queen of Angels Hollywood Press, and threaten terminating our contract the next day and going to the board and telling them why if they didn't change their behavior and change their actions. And this is when we had nowhere to go. So we definitely had controversy in those days as well. One of my favorite memories, though, of those early days were getting together every Thursday night in Dave Smith's apartment, our big company of a few people, and watching L.A. Law. It was a real good family time in those days. That moved us into the early years. Years 2 and 3 is what I call the early years. We continued to see a lot of growth. We added the University of Minnesota, United Western, Long Beach Memorial, Loma Linda, Saddleback. We greatly expanded our reference list. And with that expansion, we were pretty efficient because we did it with only growing the company 40% in the second year. You can see the additions here were Tim Miller, who had worked with Dave and I at Anderson Consulting, and we had our second college graduate, Noel Jouer from the University of Minnesota, 2 people that are still here with us today. By the end, with growth brought the need for additional office space. And here we're moving out of our original corporate headquarters and building a new office space at our house on Wall Street, which is still my office today. Well, we did reach our dream of making the West Coast, and it was the West Coast of Maui. At the end of year 3, we went to celebrate on the West Coast of Maui. And we were so happy, we brought the company along, all over to Hawaii to have our meeting. 13 strong at this point, all looking forward with positive optimism at the future. We were going strong. Someone asked me, when did the company really get going, and when was it going just as we envisioned it? Well, I have to say that things were going pretty much like we envisioned it that afternoon when we were sipping wine, champagne, on Haleakala, having helicoptered up there. We thought this is the way that we had envisioned this company operating. That was year 3. Then we had a shift in philosophy that would have very huge, is really the reasons that everyone in this room is here today. About the same time that we came back from Hawaii, I got into discussions with another individual who was thinking of making a move in their career. It was at this time that John Curdell came to the same conclusion about his staying or leaving Anderson Consulting that I did. Here's a picture of John leaving his office. I understand he just got up one day, walked away, and left his office at Anderson Consulting and came on board. Now, John really pushed this company for growth. He saw the way that we created growth for this company was to expand our product offerings, expand our size to create opportunities out in the market, but also to create opportunities for people to grow. And he was the one that pushed the team at the time. We had had some promotions, so Dave and Scott were managers, and Patrick were managers, and he pushed us to really think beyond where we were looking at in terms of growing. And everybody in this room that's a part of now a company of 185 people, if you're looking for one person to thank for the contribution that they made in helping us look at and see that this large organization is what we need to become, it would be John Curdell. Everybody owes him a debt of gratitude. Let's see. I got to go back a couple slides. Now, I hope not too many people saw that. Along with John came the need for more experienced hires. If we were going to expand, we needed more people. Now, people ask me, who was the most difficult recruit you ever had along the way? Very simple answer in terms of convincing. This guy, Chuck Ellison, was the most difficult recruit. I still remember having to sit him down in a restaurant saying, Chuck, you just don't get it. We can improve your life. We can offer you better things. You won't be traipsing around the country. Why don't you come join us? And really had to kind of strong-arm him. Chuck became, by the way, our first experienced manager that we hired directly into the company. Well, little did I know that they were competing, his company was competing to keep Chuck in ways that we couldn't match. They had a private jet, and they were taking him all across the country, and all we could do is transport Chuck in Avis rental buses along the way between project sites and locations. So we were at a bit of a disadvantage when we were in our recruiting efforts with Chuck. But the company grew, and in these years, these were the high growth years, the 94 through 97, 98 time frame. We started to add on more prestigious clients. Here's Amy in front of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. We started to add on more services. And with the need for services came the need for experienced people to guide those services. Jeff Jones, another owner today, came on board to help guide and lead the Health East project efforts, along with Steve Norris, who John had brought with him. We saw projects getting larger. This is the Vanderbilt project team. My gosh, this was the size of the company at 3 years old. And now we've got a project team of that size at Vanderbilt as the projects got more complex. We saw continued growth in the company. Here's a picture of the company, I believe, at the 4-year time frame. And we saw the need for the first time with classroom-type setting and classroom-type training. The company continued to grow. This is a picture at the 5-year time frame. With this kind of growth, we had the unfortunate circumstance of name tags for the first time that we needed. We also saw the growth of the company to the point where we filled a whole boat. So we were definitely growing, definitely getting large as a company. All this time, Gail continued to be the cheerleader for the company. Here she is growing as well as we were about to add our third child onto the family, Mark. She was always a positive influence along the way. Adding West as an owner during this time frame, that's the best picture we could find. Adding West as an owner, and with this growth, we saw the need for the first time ever to push beyond the walls of our residence for office space. And we went to a place called B Street in Lake Oswego with 1,500 feet of office space, which we thought, we've arrived. This will last us for the next 5 years. We've got enough space to work in. Short year and a half later, we were moving again out of B Street as we continued to grow into our new facility at Cruz. We got this one huge suite, all sorts of offices. We were convinced that that was going to last us for the next 5 years. Shortly thereafter, we were into our second and third space at Cruz as well. This is us getting ready to actually move to the Meadows office. So we continued to see a lot of growth in the process. Growth also presented some other opportunities. It presented us the opportunity to codify and document for the first time and put down on paper, or in acrylic, as we might see here, what we were all about, what our mission and vision was all about. And I'm just excited to say that this was not a hard activity. The only thing that made it hard is you had a lot of people, a lot of managers and directors voting on exactly what word to say. But from a conceptual, philosophical basis, and one of the reasons I think we've always been successful, is we all had these same values and principles in our heart. They're what made us up. And so it was very easy to put together our guiding principles. These were the years when John got up and talked about the sword and the shield and being on the leading edge of innovation. And who can ever forget those inspirational measures as we tried to continue to perpetuate the culture of the company. One other thing that growth did, many other things, but one is it definitely resulted in improved It didn't scare anybody else away. Here we are taking someone else and hauling them off after they had tried to entertain us along the way. But still, even though these people paid the price, we had other people that wanted to get up and show their act. Who can forget Andrew Grovemeyer's famous Elvis impersonation along the way? Or John strumming the strings of the guitar here. And my all-time favorite was Scott Collins doing his famous Copacabana impersonation. All leading up to the fact that now with the size of company we have and the budget that we have, we are now having here, this was Patrick McDermott at one of our Western parties also taking a crack at the entertainment, all advancing to the point where we now have the Barstow Band, and we're looking forward to getting them up here in a few short minutes. So entertainment improved, but growth also presented ownership opportunities. Here's a great moment in late 1995 when we executed ownership documents with the first other owners other than myself, Dave, Patrick, Scott, and John, in the office at Wall Street, celebrating that great moment and bringing our wives in to celebrate as well. And we designed a plan which would allow for ownership opportunities for everybody in the company who achieves a level of performance and progression through their career. This time frame also brought the introduction of Ron Witkowski into the company, and he played a valuable role in helping structure the original owner agreements and have played some key roles along the way. By the way, if you don't know it, Ron is now a full-time employee with the company, doing a great job of heading up our marketing efforts and our marketing support and also our contracting process. Growth also brought additional owners, additional support needs and requirements, and Doug joined us a short time ago. Also, Paul, who's not here today, joined and is another member of the ownership team. Paul is back in Atlanta awaiting the delivery of their second child. So growth created many opportunities. Unfortunately, there's a downside of growth, and that is that it created more infrastructure, rules and regulations along the way. But I have to tell you, we had the perfect person in the company that was geared to take us through this very difficult time frame, and that's Henry. Great compliance officer, great to keep us all in line. When I reflect back on the 10 years, and that's something fun to do, there's a number of things that I think about. One of the things I'm struck and awed about is how lives are intertwined and relationships are commingled. I had no idea that 20 years ago, when I first stepped into Anderson's office and saw John Curdell for the first time, that we'd have this wonderful relationship spanning this period of time. Or 17 years ago, when I met Doug Fenstermaker for the first time, and I was the little squirt consultant and working for this client, that we'd still be working together. Or Dave and Jeff and Scott and others. I'm just very impressed with the relationships and how they intermingle with each other. I also appreciate the confidence that a number of friends placed in me. When I added it up, there's about 12 people that directly left Anderson Consulting, took a risk with their careers, particularly the early years, and joined me in my venture, and I'm very grateful for that. There's been a number of important clients along the way. People asked me to rank the clients, and I'd have to say that the most important were the early ones, Health East, which helped us in so many ways financially in the beginning, to help us develop new services, St. John's Oxnard, people like Abbott Northwestern, which is our first big leap into the big nationally known organizations. Long Beach Memorial was a pillar in the Southern California community. UC San Diego introduced us to all of the California organizations, and Northwestern has been a wonderful organization. If I'd have to say those are the big ones, that was it. If I had it to do over again, people asked the question, if you had anything to do over, what would you do? I have to say that maybe beyond the little things like not taking a certain client by the lake, as we like to refer them to, and other little decisions, there's not a lot different. We'd probably prepare for growth earlier. We really didn't plan on that in the first few years, and we didn't hire accordingly. And that worked its way through the process. But I'm glad to say that we've made some good decisions along the way. My greatest satisfaction, though, as you know, is being able to create opportunity. Create opportunity for our hospitals, for our clients to have better operations, for their communities, and to create opportunities that reward people, both from career satisfaction and economics along the way, people that are in this room. If I had one memory, one event that I'd have to say was my favorite as I reflect back of a company event, you just can't top New Orleans. Whoever was with us at the time, maybe if you haven't even been here at the time, how can you forget shutting down Royale Street and having our company march up the street as they shut traffic down at peak rush hour time? That was a wonderful time. People had a wonderful celebration along the way. So where are we going? How good are we at even predicting that? Well, if you ask this question, revenue is certainly one measure of this. If you ask this question, back in 1990, we would have said, well, we're going to get up to 10 or 15 people, a couple projects, and be this happy little Western accounts receivable consulting firm. We weren't even so good at predicting where you'd be if you look at the second line when we took another look at it in 1995 and tried to project where we'd be on revenue basis. We kind of missed the mark there. We have a vision now that I presented in San Antonio that shows dramatic growth. So I don't really know. We know that we're growing rapidly. We know that we're experiencing a lot of success. Where we end up, you don't actually know. We may try some more direct marketing here. I never quite get that out of my blood. Here I am last March on Wall Street practicing some direct marketing of another consumer product here. Where we end up going, I don't know, but I do know that we're going to be successful. And why I know we're going to be successful certainly has some of the things to do with the chart that we put up in San Antonio where we talk about us having a premium service. We're number one in the market. Yeah, that stuff is all great. But it's really based on the foundation of the chart, and that is the people. I know we're going to be successful because we've got intelligent, talented people, energetic, passionate people about the cause. We've got competitive people. Boy, do we have competitive people. We compete in basketball. We compete in pool. We even compete in the game tables, it looks like. We compete in golf. We compete in being on the mechanical horse, in lassoing, in bowling, and even silly hats, silly outfits. We compete. We are a competitive group of people. But we're also a group of people that while we compete, enjoy each other. And we're very much a family and very much share similar values in that and know how to have a good time with each other. We're also committed to a common cause, and that binds us together and perpetuates our culture. Oops, I'm going to go back here. So I have no doubt that we are going to succeed because of the people that are here. We are innovative, we're creative, we have an environment that fosters that. We also have people that are very dedicated and committed and have made sacrifices for this company. I'm going to have people stand right now who have been with this company at various times. But these are the people that are about to stand are the people that built the very foundation of this company, that built this company to something that's been successful and a company that you can be proud of to be with. And they made sacrifices. I'm going to sound like, yeah, we used to walk 10 miles through the snow to get to our first client. But we used to travel on Sunday afternoons to Minnesota to get to that client site first thing on Monday morning and come home late Friday nights because that's what it took in those early years. And these are the people that built that to the point where we were able to get running and operational and enjoy some of the schedules and lifestyle benefits that we have today. The 10-year people this month that are celebrating 10 years with the company are Dave Smith and Scott Collins, and I'd like you to stand. And please remain standing. People in their 9th year or their 10th year now, completed 9. Scott Sharpen and Patrick Jennings, if you'd stand. People who have completed 8 years, Tim Miller and No Juer, if you'll stand. John Curdell at 7 years. Lee, Steve, Chuck, Andrew, Nancy, Amy, Doug, and Shannon have all been here 6 years. And Jeff, Patrick, Gary, Amy, West, Shelley, Henry, Amy, Andrew, and Mitzi have all been here 5 years. These are the people that have built the company. But finally, I know that we're going to be successful. For all of the reasons, and you've heard me say this before, that we've been successful to date. And I believe that God has blessed this company, that it's been looked after. Too many things have happened, too many circumstances have happened along the way to cause me to think any different from that. And I believe that one of the reasons that He's blessed is because we have taken the resources that we've garnered from this company and we've given back. I know we individually, Gail and I know many of the people that are owners, many of you people in the room, are very dedicated to giving back and serving others who are in need. And I am convinced that that is the reason we will succeed. I live by, a few models. They tend to be biblically based, and I'm going to share that belief. And it's not because I'm trying to convert anybody to my biblical belief. As the founder of this company, as the leader of this company, those beliefs enter into how we operate this company, and I think it's important for people to know. And there's really 3 verses that summarize mine the best. And one comes from Ephesians 2:10, and it reads, "For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God has prepared in advance for us to do." I believe we are on this earth beyond worshiping our Creator, beyond worshiping Jesus. The reason we're on this earth is to do good. And these are works that God has prepared in advance for you. And that's what motivates and that's what drives me and that's what I want to see us continue to do. Now, whether you accept that biblical belief or not, you have to say that those presentations this morning and the good feelings that we all had show that that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to help others. Why else would someone have that very positive feeling unless they're doing the things they were created to do? There's a letter that came through that I wanted to read on the optometry project at Houston that I wanted to share with the group. It came to the project team, and it came from someone at the College of Optometry. And it read, "We are all feeling so honored that you chose the College of Optometry's Vision Screening Program as your special project. A gift of money is indeed a powerful tool for change, but the gift of yourself is priceless. Each one of you blended seamlessly into the situation at hand, and you truly did achieve your goal of maximizing your company's gift. Through your volunteer efforts, we were able to provide screening services to 80 individuals instead of 40 on Wednesday, and 125 instead of 60 on Thursday. And what's even more exciting is that we've already seen one patient today whose life was impacted by your gift, and we have another scheduled for an appointment next week. The mother of the patient today gave her approval for us to take pictures, so we were able to document our first voucher patient. We can't wait to share the pictures with you. Your dedication and commitment to make a difference in the world is inspiring. We encourage you to continue to offer of yourself to others in need. The world will be enriched as we were because of you. Please stay in touch. We may have only had a brief time together, but the impact you have had on UHCO Vision Screening Program and the community of Houston will last indefinitely." How does that not make you feel that you're doing what you're called to do? There's 2 other verses that summarize my beliefs. One is in Luke 12:48. Jesus is talking, and he says, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. That's followed up with, give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And we certainly have been, as a company, blessed. And it certainly has been flowing and pressed over. John may use the terminology, we've done well while doing good. And I think we have to continue to focus on doing that. We've been giving a tremendous asset. This company is an enormous asset with tremendous potential to do good to our clients, to their patients, to their communities. But then the resources that we garner, the income that we make, gives us a tremendous potential to do good. We've got to treasure that asset. We've got to protect that asset. We've got to be good stewards with that asset. That's why we're not taking this asset and looking out and trying to become an IPO or taking it and selling it to someone who would destroy the culture of this process. What I'm really excited about is what we've done to date, and what I'm really looking forward to is how we're going to take this asset and do good for the world as a result of this. And if we do that, and if we keep our focus on that collectively and individually, we're going to be blessed. We're going to have continued success. Where that number ends up, I don't know. But I know we're going to be successful. So we've had a lot of changes over the years. From year one, 6 people strong, to growing greatly. Seen a lot of changes over the years. Now we've got an administrative or enterprise support team, which is as big as the company was at year 3. We've gone from very humble beginnings to very posh corporate headquarters. Very nice facilities, whose mail room is now bigger than what all of our office space was probably 5 years into the company. It's been a lot of hard work, a lot of energy, a lot of dedication, a lot of sacrifice into this company. A lot of energy. It's taken a toll. It's been exhausting work. But a lot of people have made enormous contributions to this organization. And I'm really looking forward to the next 10 years and seeing what we can do with the potential and just the start that we've got today. Thank you. Thank you. What is that?
Microphone?
Sure. I don't know which one it is. I think it's this one. I'll turn it on. Try it out.
Is this the right one? Okay. We couldn't let this occasion pass without giving Dale a small memento of our appreciation. I'd like to personally thank you, Dale, for all the opportunity you've given me. You've made a big impact on my life, more than you know. And anyway, we couldn't let this pass without doing something small for you. So as they say, wouldn't you get a guy who has everything? At least you go buy something, whatever you want. So the answer to that is get him something that he can't get himself. So we knew that Dale, you have a small affinity for basketball. So
Yeah.
we thought we would get you a basketball that has all of our names on it.
Oh, that's great. That's
So that you
great.
can remember the opportunity that you've given each and every one of us.
That's great. Thank you. This is wonderful.
And Dale, would you come forward, please?
This is great. This is great. Very special.
And we know you truly were the cheerleader for Dale and for the... Well, you haven't said your famous line here, so go ahead.
Say it, say it.
Say it.
I can't believe how big it's got. I'm overwhelmed.
Anyway, we know that the cheerleader for Dale and for the company has always been Dale, and without her support, we would have never gotten off the ground. And so we want to give her her own little memento of this passing occasion. And since he got a basketball, you get a basketball, a crystal basketball.
Ah, that's nice. Thank you. Thank you.
For any of those, including myself, who haven't had a chance to sign it yet, it will be up here right after the meeting, and please be sure to get your signature on it. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.